Hey, thanks for watching. We're coming to you from Fool Global Headquarters in Alexandria, Virginia. I'm Chris Hill, and I'm joined in studio by certified financial planner Robert Brokamp, senior analyst Jason Moser. Thanks for being here, guys.
Great to be here.
We're going to be taking your questions. We're going to be talking about mistakes, which seems appropriate on Halloween.
It's true. More trick than treat, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. More than 40% of Americans have been making this mistake. You're the certified financial planner. What's the mistake?
The mistake is they're not saving for retirement, right? So unless these folks change their behavior, I guess they're planning on relying just on Social Security in retirement. That could be problematic. This year, the average Social Security benefit, the retirement benefit, is less than $18,000. So I imagine you out there want to have a retirement that costs more than that. So the sooner you can start saving, the better. So let's look at some numbers here. So let's say you're younger, and you can start saving maybe $4,000 a year. You do that for 40 years, earning 8% a year, you'll have $1.1 million by the time those 40 years are done. That's great. What if you delay? What if you start a decade later? You will have less than $500,000. So you've missed out on more than $500,000 of growth that you could have had if you had started sooner.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, you mentioned saving $4,000 a year, which I think is, that's probably pretty reasonable for a lot of people. One of the things that we've taught in Fool School before, we're teaching this to elementary kids and high school kids about the value in starting young and keeping it going. Let's go down to something like $50 per month. I mean, if you can contribute $50 per month to some type of an investment retirement account, the value in starting early is just tremendous. And if you look at this, if you start at the age of 20, with just $50 monthly contributions, going with that average rate of return on the market, at the end of 40 years, you're closing in on about $185,000. That's just $50 a month. If you wait until you're 30, it's $91,000. If you wait until you're 40 and you start then, now you're looking at $42,000, all by the time you hit that age of 65 years old. So really, you can see there's just a tremendous value in starting early, whether it's $4,000 per year, whether it's $50 per month. Getting started and keeping it going is really the key.
All right. Keep those questions coming. We're going to get to them in just a couple of minutes. We'll also be sharing the mistakes that we've made, because let's face it, we've all made mistakes when it comes to money. Yeah. But bro, you think about the different stages of life that we all go through. I mean, a lot of people, particularly when they're just starting out, I remember when I was in my 20s, I was excited to get that first paycheck. I wasn't looking to put it away, to save it. It was fun to get that money. And also, one of the dominant financial stories of the past few years here in the United States, college debt. Let's face it, some people aren't saving for retirement because they really can't afford to right now.
Right, that's true. And it's an unfortunate reality, but the bottom line really is it's very difficult to beat the return you get from just starting early, especially if you are being offered a match by your 401k at work or your 403b, whatever type of plan you have, because you put money in. When you put money in that plan, you get a tax break, first of all, but then you get free money on top of that. And anywhere from 25% to a third of people are not taking full advantage of that. So even if you have that debt, even if you have trouble meeting some of your expenses, I think you need to do whatever you can to at least get 10% of your income into your savings and take full advantage of your match as well.
I mean, think about it this way. There's a decent chance at some point here in the next 10 years, perhaps sooner. I mean, this is such a political hot potato right now. But there's a decent chance a lot of this student debt is going to be canceled. And it's going to be canceled because there's no other choice. It's simply unsatisfiable. I mean, you can't get blood from a stone, right? But at least if you're saving that money every month and putting it in your 401k, or if you don't have a job, if you don't have an employer-sponsored retirement plan, you can put it in your own IRA. If you keep on saving, that's your money, right? That's not going to be canceled. So whether or not you have that student debt outstanding or whatever, but getting started saving and getting that investment account going, I mean, the time really is just, it's so crucial.
Yeah, and if you're having trouble finding the money to save, I'm a big fan of sweating the big stuff. Small stuff matters as well, but look at the big stuff. And according to the Department of Labor, the three biggest line items in a household budget is housing, 33%, transportation 17%, and food 13%. Housing, the next time you're in a position to make a housing decision, if you can do it so that it's a lower cost option, maybe lower rent, maybe you have a bigger house in a good school district because you raised your kids, but the kids are not out of the house. You can move to a smaller house in a place that doesn't cost as much because the school district isn't as expensive. That's a great to find extra money. Transportation, the cost of a new car these days is $32,000. Partially that's because people are buying bigger cars. And according to Edmunds, the car buying site, a third of people, when they take out a loan for a new car, they still owe money on their old car because people aren't keeping their cars long enough. So that's a great way to save money. Keep your car for at least a decade, buy a small car, and buy used if possible. And then when it comes to food, the number one determinant of someone's food budget is how much they eat out versus whether they cook at home, as well as how much we waste. Americans on average waste 25% of their food. So if you're looking for an easy way to save maybe $200, $300, $400 a month, cut back on your food budget.
I'll tell you, I do most of the cooking at home, and I mean, we do that because we just like being able to make food at home and have dinner and not have to rely on going out. But I see those numbers on a monthly basis, and you can really, really save a lot of money by just learn how to cook, plan out a simple little menu. I mean, you can make a lot of good food for not a whole heck of a lot of money, and save a lot in the process if you can just avoid the eating out. The delivery, I think today, it's just so easy. I get it. I mean, everybody's time is valuable. Right. The delivery certainly makes it easy, but yeah, learn how to make a dish or two, and that could help.
Yep. You know, Jason, it's interesting. We talk about temperament a lot when it comes to investing in stocks, having that longer-term time frame. And it seems like when it comes to saving for retirement, if you know your own temperament, and for a lot of people, and I'm certainly one of them, I'm more of a set it and forget it type of person. To the extent that you can get in those systems earlier, you mentioned the 401k, 403b, that sort of thing, to the extent that you can essentially automate your savings so that it doesn't have to be an ongoing thing you're dealing with every week or 2 weeks or even every month, you're going to be better off.
Oh, there's no question. And I mean, think about it from the perspective of my job as an analyst. I love finding those companies that have figured out ways to really integrate those subscription models into their businesses, right? They love the subscription model because most of us as consumers will just click subscribe and then we'll forget it, particularly if it's something that we use a lot, like Netflix or this upcoming Disney Plus service. I think will probably be a very good example as well. Then slowly but surely over time, they start inching those prices up a little bit, and you don't ever really notice because you've just fallen in that habit of not really caring because you're getting that value there. The same thing really applies if you can start just automatically saving for yourself. It is a little bit of a difficult ball to get rolling, but once you start doing it, as time passes on, as life takes over and things are happening, you do forget that is one of those things that's coming out, and really it is ultimately for your benefit. So you should never really frame it as a loss. And I think a lot of people tend to frame it as a loss because they feel like it's cash out of their pocket. It's really just being put from one bucket into another one.
Let's get to our own horror stories, our own mistakes that we've made. Robert, let me start with you.
Yeah, so this is actually awfully embarrassing, but recently I rediscovered that I had contributed to an IRA a decade ago, and then I had kind of forgotten about it, which means it sat in cash for the last decade. So the opportunity cost of that really is like thousands of dollars. So after I had rediscovered it, I remembered what happened. So a decade ago, we were just recovering from the Great Recession. And at that point, we weren't quite sure we were recovering, so everyone was a little nervous. And I was looking for the perfect investment. I was delayed, as Warren Buffett calls it, sucking my thumb, looking for the best investment. And what happened is life happened and I had forgotten about it. The lesson there is, number one, the best time to invest is now, and don't dawdle. I could have chosen something just as easy as like a total stock market index fund and said, I'm just going to invest in this until I find maybe a stock or two or three or four that I really, really like. But at least I'm invested in the process, and I would have made a lot more money.
Let's put a pin in the total stock index fund in just a second. We'll come back to that. Jason, what's yours?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been investing for a while now, and it started with my father just buying me a couple of shares of companies as gifts when I was a teenager. You know, what every teenage boy wants is shares of stock. And in my case, it actually resonated. It worked out pretty well. But all along the way, he got that ball rolling, and I owned shares of Dell and of Walgreens, and I knew that was computers and drugstores, and that was about it. And then as time went on, I just kind of blindly would send a check to my Edward Jones representative, back in the day of the $50 trade commission and whatnot. We don't have that anymore. But the bottom line was I would send this check in every month almost blindly. And it just never really struck me until one day I started asking some more questions: is where is that money going? What are you putting that money in? And that was where I thought about this. I said, you know what? I'm putting all of this money somewhere. I don't know where it's going. I don't know anything about what I own. And to me, that became somewhat scary because, again, it's my money. No one should care about it more than me. And it struck me at that point that really I do care about it an awful lot. I better know where it is. And of course, it was being invested in companies like Cisco at the top of the dot-com bubble. That didn't work out so well, Chris. Thankfully, there was no debilitating loss, but there was just that wake-up moment where I thought, you know what? At the end of the day, whether it's investing or saving or like your IRA example there, just know where your money is and what it's doing. I think a lot of people, particularly as you get older and your assets diversify, you've got money in different places, it's easy to lose track. It really is. No one should care about it more than you. Just know where your money is and what it's doing.
Well, it's like we say all the time about stocks. When people ask, well, I'm ready to invest in stocks, where should I start? And we usually say, start with the businesses that you know, because if you know and understand it, you're going to be better off. You're going to be able to track a little bit better. Let's go back to the total index fund, because I think that's a great next step for people who are starting to save for their retirement. They are putting the money away. And, you know, if they're doing it in an account where they can make some investments, what are a couple of things that they should look for in terms of just the basics?
Yeah, I'm a big believer, and we at the Motley Fool are big believers in a total U.S. stock market index fund. Mm-hmm. It's the classic,
great first step.
Great first step, a great set it and forget it investment. A lot of people, when they think of index funds, they think of the S&P 500. That's fine too, but it's just 500 companies. U.S. stock market is thousands of companies. So with a total U.S. stock market index fund, you get exposure to the smaller companies that you don't get in the S&P 500. So I think that is a great first step for anyone who wants to. Because I actually did a good deal of research recently in looking at why don't people save for retirement. And one of the big reasons is investing is complicated. And that is true. But an index fund is a great solution if you feel like I just need to do something now and I can learn more later.
I feel like as we were growing up, right, and we didn't grow up together, but I would be willing to bet that all of our parents kind of were thinking, hey, you mowed the lawn, let's take some of that money, we're going to put it in a savings account for you, right? That was the lesson. We're going to save your money. You go from piggy bank to savings account, and then that's kind of where it ends for a lot of people. And I think that when you look at where we are today, the way that the public markets have opened up for everyone, and we've seen this especially recently with all of these companies going to zero commissions. I mean, there's really no reason at all you shouldn't have your money in the stock market working for you in some capacity, whether it's a total market index, whether it's an S&P 500 index. But I really do believe that essentially is the new savings account. That's the way I'm teaching my girls to save, for example. My wife and I both see the value in making sure you have that money working for you on an ongoing basis. And we've seen, you put a couple $100 away in a savings account, the interest rates today are zero. I mean, they may be a little bit more than zero, but for all intents and purposes, they are zero. You get no return on that money. And I don't know that really is going to change materially much in the near future. And so when you're looking further down the line, you want 10, 20, 30 years of compounding to really be a tailwind for you. I feel like the index fund is the new savings account, and we've got to be teaching our kids that, so that they can be teaching that and so forth. It's just an ongoing cycle.
All right, if you're ready to take on your finances, we've got a free starter kit that covers it all. You can find it at fool.com/start. And hey, if you like the video, please consider giving us a thumbs up. It helps other people find the video. Let's get to some of the questions that are coming in. Jennifer asks, I didn't start young, I just turned 50, and I finally have an income that I can save. Is there a tax advantage way to put that money to work? Great question, Jennifer.
Yeah, and the good news is we've been talking about IRAs and 401ks and all that contribution limits go up for people who are 50 and older. So, for example, an IRA, the contribution limit this year is $6,000, but it's $7,000 if you're 50 or older. 401k, it's $19,000, but it's $25,000 if you're 50 or older. So I certainly think that that's a great idea. And when we talked about starting investing earlier, I always worry that people who are older feel like, it's too late for me. So I'm glad to hear this question, because it's never too late, especially if you're at an age where a lot of your money is going to raising kids. The kids are now about to leave the house. You don't have those bills, the college bills. The thing to do is to take all that money that you were spending on the kids and get them into the IRA and the 401k, and you can do both.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point on the catch-up opportunity there, I think that's great to remember, because I talked to some people at that same stage of life, and they realized that they let a lot of time go by and forgave a lot of opportunity there. The tendency is to want to figure out a way to make up for lost time. And a lot of people will do that by trying to get that next great stock tip, right? A little bit of a riskier play, so to speak, and make a little extra money. I really, really hope that most people out there, if not everyone, will just sit back, think for a second, and realize that's not really the ideal strategy. Trying to make a quick buck, timing the market, it rarely works. It's why we don't do it. Anybody can flip a coin and call heads, right? But to do that on a sustainable basis is really difficult, and that's what timing the market essentially boils down to. So don't let that lost time alter your behavior and make you start making poor decisions with your allocation.
Isn't that the thing your dad taught you? You're never going to sell at the top. You're never going to buy at the bottom. So the sooner you accept that, the better you're going to do.
That's a very, very good memory there. Yep, he taught me that one when I was a kid, and it stuck.
We got a few people asking, if I'm older, if I'm 60 or older, has the ship sailed on compounding really working for me?
And the answer is no, because most financial planners recommend that you, unless you have any health issues, you should expect to live to your 90s. So while if you're retired, let's say you retire at age 67 or so, right? Some of that money that's in your portfolio you're going to need in the nearer future. But some of that money will be invested because you're going to need that in your 70s and your 80s and your 90s. For that money, you have a long-term time horizon, and you have time for that compounding to take effect. I recently wrote an article also, though, that pointed out the best thing you can do if you're behind in your retirement savings, especially if you're in your 50s or 60s, is to delay retirement by just 2, 3, 4 years. By doing that, you can increase your retirement income by up to a third, maybe even 50%, because that's the value of delaying Social Security, of delaying the amount of time, letting your 401k to grow longer before you tap it, and those extra few years of contributions.
Everybody talks about retirement, but I don't hear people talking about what they're going to do when they retire. I got to feel like there's a lot of bored people out there, right? Like, I guess I wouldn't mind retiring at some point, but I do enjoy my work. I mean, I don't know, man. Retirement seems to be the goal, but not a lot of people have this is what I'm going to do after I retire. Maybe you got to figure that one out.
Right, I did a whole speech on that, and there's some evidence that full-time retirement may not be good for you. So one of the best things maybe you could do is, once you reach an age where you don't want to work full-time, just work part-time, because you still have some money coming in, you still have the employee benefits, but you're also essentially part-time retired, so you get some of the benefits of retirement.
Robert asks, is it better to pay something like a home mortgage off early, like 15 years, and then putting the money into investing after?
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly depends on the individual situation. I mean, there are always things to consider, whether it's tax benefits from the interest that you're paying off on your mortgage. I tend to like paying off your home sooner rather than later. I think anytime you can satisfy a big debt obligation like that, you want to do it because that gives you more options with the money that you have coming in. But it is worth remembering that everybody's situation is unique. Take into consideration your tax bill at the end of the year and how that works. But yeah, I tend to want to pay my mortgage off sooner rather than later.
Yeah, there's from a pure numbers perspective, if you were to throw this into a spreadsheet, it's basically, if you can earn a return on your money that exceeds the rate on your mortgage, then theoretically you should invest that and maintain the mortgage. That said, I love the idea of having my mortgage paid off before I retire. I want that obligation taken care of, so my wife and I are accelerating our payments because we want to get rid of that mortgage before I retire. From a numbers perspective, it may not make the most sense, but it just feels right to us.
Well, yeah, I mean, you'll see people, we're at such a great time right now in the interest rate environment, and you can take that 30-year mortgage, you can refinance it down into a 15-year mortgage, and while you're making that monthly payment likely a lot higher in the near term, you are saving a ton in interest. And if you don't believe me, just look at the two amortization charts between a 15 and a 30-year mortgage. You look at the amount of interest that you pay over the course of a mortgage. I mean, it is phenomenal. I mean, that will make you don't think about it month to month because it's just your mortgage payment. But when you look at the amount of interest you pay, if you were to go all 30 years with that mortgage, it's astounding.
Yep.
Warren asks, what formula or rule do you recommend to calculate how much money you'll need to live in retirement?
Well, I mean, you're the certified financial planner, bro. I don't know about formulas, but I do know you want to take at least somewhere. I've seen studies here, and I believe it was Schwab, but it was somewhere. I think they had a range. They did a survey. There was a range of 40 to 60% of your current salary that you want to have for annual living expenses going forward.
Right. You look at the percentage of your pre-retirement income, and there's some variability around that. If you are in a higher income, you're talking like household income of $300,000, $200,000, then you probably need only about half of that in retirement. If you are in a lower income bracket, like $30,000, $40,000, you need about 80% of that when you retire. Now, there are a few sort of guidelines about whether you have enough to cover that in retirement, and Fidelity's done some good research on this, and they basically found that if you want to retire at 65, you should have 12 times your household income saved up before you retire. If you delay it to 67, you only need 10 times your household income to be able to retire.
Jude asks, can you explain target date funds and whether they're a good place to put money?
I'm a big fan of target date funds. It's a mutual fund that owns other mutual funds, and it's based on basically a relatively reasonable asset allocation for your age. So there's a date in each name. So let's say you have a target retirement 2050 fund. Assumes you're going to retire around 2050. That's far out, so it's going to be mostly in the stock market, U.S. stocks, international stocks, small caps, large caps, a little bit of cash and bonds. But as we get closer to 2050, it's going to gradually get more conservative. It's basically doing the money management and rebalancing for you. So I think it's a great starting place, a great set it and forget it. The only drawback on it is that they tend to be a little more conservative than the typical Motley Fool reader. So if you're an aggressive investor, chances are it's probably a little more on the safe side than you would want.
Yeah, and that's what we talk about always between that sort of stage in life, whether you're in that grow your wealth stage versus the protect your wealth stage. And when you get closer to that target date, you need to be focused on protecting your wealth, because I mean, the last thing you need at that point, when you're 59, 60, 61 years old, you've been doing all that work to that point. You don't want some type of market calamity to set you back another decade.
Right. Dave asks, what's with the smoke at the bottom of the screen? What is the camera guy doing behind the scenes? Shout out to Taylor Harris, our graphics wizard, for the smoke.
It is Halloween,
everybody.
Yeah.
One viewer asks, as a parent, how do you guys think about helping your kids out with school versus saving for your own retirement? Bro, I know you've got kids, and I know you have a kind of a hot take on this very particular question.
I don't know a hot take, but so first of all, your retirement is your number one responsibility. Plain and simple, right? If you don't have anything saved for college, your kid wants to go to college, there are ways to do it. Community college, loans, scholarships, all that type of stuff. So your retirement is your number one priority. That said, you don't have to send them to any school they want to go. So my wife and I had a general rule of thumb is we will pay for college in state, and we live in Virginia, we got lots of great options. If you want to go out of state and it costs more than that, you might have to find a way to make up that difference.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're in the middle of starting to talk about these now with 13 and 14-year-olds, and I was very fortunate. My mom and dad footed my college bill. I am under no illusion that was cheap. I know how much it cost, and I'm very grateful every day. I also know that I don't want to saddle our girls with $50,000 in student loan debt when they graduate college. So, my wife, she paid for some of it, her parents paid for some of it, and I feel like that's sort of where we're going to meet with our kids. To your point, you don't have to go anywhere, right? There are all sorts of ways to get that education, all sorts of schools to go to, and there are all sorts of ways to get money to make that happen, whether it's grants or scholarships. Hopefully, if you're a parent and you've opened that 529 up and saved a little bit, that'll help the cause. But yeah, I really, really do feel strongly. I mean, you do not want to saddle those kids with $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 in student loan debt, because right as soon as they graduate, you know where they're going? They're going right back into your house. They're moving into your basement. They're going to be eating your food.
See, I love your line, which is, there is no retirement scholarship.
No.
So there's money out there for kids to go to school. There are different scholarships they can apply for. There's no scholarship for you to retire on.
Yeah. And there are actually many people here at the Motley Fool don't have a college degree. It's possible to go find the right employer to do the job you want that will take you on for your experience and your skills, not because of your degree.
M asks, why do some people say There will be no money to pay out corporate pensions or Social Security. I don't understand it, but it seems a little scary. To that point, it does seem like every couple of years we do, at least in the case of Social Security, get an update in the news of, oh, at this date in the future, that's when Social Security is going broke.
Right, so the majority of Social Security benefits are paid from current payroll taxes. So we're working, so we pay payroll taxes. Most of that goes straight to today's retirees. And that will always be the case. As long as people are working and paying payroll taxes, there will be money in the system. Now, at some point, there's not enough money to cover that, and there are trust funds that have been built up to cover that difference, but they will be exhausted. So I certainly think anyone who is 50 or younger should plan on having a reduced benefit, maybe only 75% of what they're being promised, but they'll get something. Pensions are a whole different story, and it really depends on who's offering the pension. Some corporate pensions and some government pensions are perfectly well funded, and you'll be fine. Some, particularly some like state and local pensions, man, they are significantly underfunded, and the only thing that's going to happen is either A, the retirees aren't going to get what they're promised, or B, the taxpayers are on the hook, and that's a scary situation.
Paul asks, Jason mentioned calling an index fund a savings account. Is that safe with the downside risk in a falling market, or is he talking about cash beyond the emergency fund?
No, I mean, I think that's safe in any market, because ultimately when you're talking about investing in an index fund, I mean, typically we're looking at doing that consistently, right? Month after month after month. And so that dollar cost averaging helps smooth out those lumps, whether you're in good times or in bad. And ultimately, as net buyers of stocks or net buyers of funds, we do like to buy when the market is down, because that means we're getting a little bit more bang for our buck. So over the course of time, it works out well.
I will say, though, that if you absolutely need the money in the next 1, 2, or 3 years, that I would play it safer with cash or short-term bonds, me personally. So once my kids were in high school and getting to that point of college age, I'd move their college savings to mostly cash and bonds.
And I 100% agree with that. I mean, that's a standing rule. I think we always say, if you need that money within the next 3, 4, 5 years, you shouldn't have it in the market, because you just don't know what's going to happen, and you don't want to be caught in the position of being a desperate seller. So certainly take that into consideration. But when we're talking about saving money over the course of 5, 10, 15, 20, if your timeline is essentially indefinite, that's when the market starts looking a little bit more attractive, because really time is your buddy as an investor.
Jacqueline asks, what's the best way to save and get compounding working for grandchildren?
Great question, and I'll let you answer this, because you have done a fantastic job with teaching.
I thought you were going to let you say, because you actually have.
I don't have grandkids, everybody, but if I did, here's what I would do. I would do exactly what my wife and I have done with our kids right now.
That's the point I was making.
And just to put some more context around that, our girls are 13 and 14 now. When they were about 7 years old, I think, we got them started investing, and it was just because of a conversation we had on what I do for a living. And so we just took a little bit of the money that they would get from saving and birthdays and all that stuff, and we would kind of put it together. We'd help them out a little bit, and we would just start buying stocks of businesses that they liked. And this is all just a matter of, again, like that net buyer of stocks mentality. We're buying them, we're never selling them, we're going to own them as long as possible. I mean, they will ultimately be the legal holders of those accounts, and then they can do what they want with them. But until then, they'll hopefully have a 15-year track record of seeing how the market can really work. I think that's the way to do it. I think that when they're 6 and 7 years old, that is not too young to get started. It's a great time to get started. I'm not looking to have stock chats with my kids at the dinner table every night. We check their portfolios out maybe 4 times a year. But it starts to resonate. They see that their money is growing like a tree, and they're not doing anything to make that happen. And the older they get, the more they realize it, and the more they appreciate it, and the more they want to continue doing it. Again, it really just goes back to starting young. And we've talked about funds. I think if you're talking about your grandkids, an S&P 500 index fund is a great first step. From there, you've learned how to walk, maybe you learn how to run, and you start adding some individual stocks in there. But I think it's never too young to start.
One thing I'll add to that is, once they start working, they can open an IRA and you can fund it. So when my son started doing his lifeguarding job at age 16, my wife and I opened up a Roth IRA for him and put the money in. And grandparents can do that too.
Yeah, and I mean, the mechanics of it are simple. I mean, we opened up, it's the same as a savings account for the kid. I mean, it's a custodial account, right? The child is the owner, I'm a custodian. Once they hit, I believe it's 18 here, maybe it's 21. Either way, they hit a legal age where it becomes theirs. But it's open, you can contribute to it, and anybody can contribute to it, and you buy as you see fit.
Last question. Al asks, can you explain the tax benefits of a Roth IRA versus a regular IRA versus a standard brokerage account?
So it's basically with the Roth versus the traditional, it's when do you want your tax break? So with the traditional, generally speaking, and there are some caveats to this, but generally speaking, with the traditional, when you put the money in, you get a tax deduction. It grows tax deferred while you're working, which means you don't have to report any of the gains or anything on your tax returns. But then in retirement, once you take the money out, then you pay taxes. So tax break today, pay taxes in the future.
And that's taxed as ordinary income at that point?
Yeah. Right. Roth is the other way around. You do not get a deduction for putting the money in. No tax break today. But it grows tax-free as you're working, and when you take the money out, it's tax-free. So you get a tax break in the future. So the basic rule of thumb is if you're in a high tax bracket today, choose the traditional. If you're in a low tax bracket, you choose the Roth. With the traditional the regular brokerage account, you're putting any money in, and every year you have to pay taxes on any interest, any dividends, and any capital gains if you sell the stock. So if you are buying investments in your taxable brokerage account, aim for stocks that you will hold for years, ideally decades, and that don't pay a dividend, so you don't have to pay taxes on that. So the quintessential example is Berkshire Hathaway, a stock I own, because you'll never pay taxes on it until you sell.
Yeah, and it's okay to have all three, right? I mean, like,
yes.
I do.
And I recommend that you should.
A regular brokerage account. I have a traditional IRA that I essentially used as a vehicle to roll in retirement plan funds from previous employers. And then I have my 401k here at work, which is a Roth 401k. So, I'm nicely diversified on the retirement account from that front.
Yeah, it's called Uncle Sam diversification. So you have different tax options once you reach retirement.
All right, go ahead and click the subscribe button so you don't miss any of the videos that we do here in the Motley Fools YouTube channel. Thanks again for giving us a thumbs up on this video. And again, check out our free starter kit. You can go to fool.com/start, get you on your way investing. Jason Moser, Robert Brokamp, thanks for being here, guys. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you next time.